Hi, everybody. I'm Aurora. I'm a galactic walk-in. I've been here in this world, in this body for 23 years. In fact, today is the anniversary of my walking in. I'm actually recording this video here today at the request of some of the wonderful participants who were at my Flying Rainbow Lasagna, which is this shape here, dance retreat recently. So I'm a member of Alobar's team of psychic warriors. We do missions all the time, group missions. Some of them are for individual healings, some of them for healing a situation, and a lot of them are actions to fight directly against the dark side, directly against evil, directly against demons and the forces of non-divine, artificial intelligence and technology that are trying to enslave this world. So at my most recent Flying Rainbow Lasagna Dance Retreat, I told a lot of the stories or reported a lot upon the activities that I do in these group missions. And a lot of the participants there were fascinated and overjoyed. And they said, Aurora, you have to do some videos talking about this so that people know what's going on. Because I've been admittedly holding back, not necessarily in the modality of talking about what I do, but very immersed in the actual activity. And it is an activity that I do 24/7, literally. So if in case you need to know more about me, I'm a stellar network occupant. That's not the right words, but I'm an impulse. That's a waveform on the network of stars. I have access to a huge amount of computational power and also a huge amount of stored information. So you can consider me a galactic encyclopedia and also a natural galactic supercomputer. And I use my processing power to do all sorts of wonderful things, some of which is to fight against there are some unmentionable words that I don't say here on this particular platform for sharing public videos, but let's say very, very, very tiny micromachinery that is self-assembling and that has been in people's bodies for a long time and is directly connected to these subcutaneous pollutions that have been going on for the past 4 years or so. And I use my computational power to be able to fight against that and fight against it's called artificial intelligence, but I call it genuine stupidity, the network system that runs or administrates those tiny micro machines that are trying to take over your mind. But sometimes I'm also inappropriately buoyant and very silly, but we have to use lightheartedness to be able to get through this, okay? So I'm excited to be able to share with you about these things. I told you I had been admittedly holding back for fears of a perceived self-aggrandizement. But it's been really made clear to me that sharing this information is going to help inform other people, empower other people, and hopefully inspire you to keep going. Because what I really realized from talking with others in person is that we are having an enormous impact in our individual disconnected communities. Like I talked with one lovely participant from England, and she was telling me about the things that had been done in her community fighting against subcutaneous pollutions and things that were done with citizens arrest. And I saw some videos, and this was from years ago. And I was like, wow, I had no idea that those things were even going on. And it's because of the divide and conquer strategy that is being used by our adversaries in this moment. Okay. So with all of that in the spirit of heartening you or encouraging you, knowing that there is a wider battle. Oh, hold on a second. I have to turn this off because it makes a loud noise. It's my AC makes a loud noise. You're not alone. You might be hunkering down in your own individual bunker or foxhole, but you are most certainly not alone. And our individual efforts in various different groups absolutely add up in order to make something larger happen. And we are triumphing. We are doing very, very well. So that's the backstory and motivation for what I'm going to share. So now I'll begin with some of the things that I shared at the actual retreat. So these are actions and missions that happened. You can tell I'm spacing out because I'm thinking about when it was. It must have been either early August or mid-August. So it was before September, which is when I had the retreat. And one of the main things that we did was, we have been working to, how would I say it? Act effectively against a layer of reality that is called the mirror world. We make up a lot of words for what we're encountering. We don't have a common lexicon for this. So if you could imagine a world that is an interim or a connecting space between two worlds, but something that is made up of distortion funhouse mirrors. And it's a layer of reality that I initially presumed had been erected as a force field of protection by the evil side, by the evil ones, to protect them not only from blowback, because in cosmic law, what you send out comes back to you instantaneously. So this would be a shielding and a convolution of surface area that would prevent those signals from getting back to them. But it's more than that. It is akin to a giant glamour, like a big protective force field that prevents not only accountability, but prevents a person's true face from being shown. And that there were multiple occupants of the realm within this labyrinthine layer. And this layer also seemed to be not only contravening or subverting cosmic law, but creating a protective force field for individuals who are in that world to protect them from the knowledge of their own evil. You could think of it as a very, very thick layer of invalid justifications and lies and self-stories about why it's okay or acceptable to do the things that they are doing, or justification for their motivations, or any of these things, because all of these things that we fight against are literally unconscionable. They're things that should never be done. They're things that are very, very intuitively, inherently wrong. And so it takes this very, very large machination of the cognitive function to be able to do backbends and convolutions and contortions to justify what is happening. All right, so that's to just give you a rundown and a description on what the mirror world is, and also to recognize that anybody who touches on the mirror world goes effing insane. It is a realm of insanity. You don't want to go in there. You don't want to go through there. You don't want to touch it. So whenever we've done anything to do with the mirror world, we have always had to have groups that work together. We create shielding to protect ourselves. We are constantly clearing and shielding one another, and we make sure that we don't get too close to it. My joking, and you're getting to know me, lighthearted analogy is that movie, The Blob, 1950s, sci-fi movie. There's this blob alien thing. And if you're questioning about it and you touch it, you get assimilated into it. It gets on top of you and you get drawn in. So whenever we go on missions, I tell everyone, don't touch the blob. First rules. And we create force fields of protection around one another so that we do not touch the blob. So this labyrinth, it turns out, is not just an elaborate system of justifications and dark magic that the dark magicians have used to prevent blowback on their various different naughty things that they do. It is more properly something that started out as a prison for a central figure. Like if this amethyst little massage tool is the central bad guy, I'd call him primordial evil, because that's what we're really dealing with. The central figure of evilness that then horcruxed himself or itself, fragmenting or fractaling or being diffracted into various different rays or emanations of evil insanity that are embodied in different time places. But this is the center of those emanations of evil and insanity. And that this mirror world was actually built as a perfect imprisonment around that original primordial evil to keep it stuck inside, with the intention that if the walls of the prison are perfectly oriented, anything that evil shot would bounce back at itself. This is cosmic law. And it would just be in this imprisonment, shooting itself for forever. And that seems to be like a very tidy way of dealing with something that is gross and dangerous. But what seemed to have happened is, and I'll use words like seem or appear, because I am just, innovating all of this. I'm jazzing all of this. This is not written in a book, but it appears as if that original primordial evil had found a way to shift or distort those mirrors so that its signals started to bounce out of its prison, and also energy could bounce into its prison. No time frame on when this is. I'm telepathic. I'm sensing your questions. So whether this was days, weeks, months, years, millennia, or an uncountable number of times ago, I don't know when that started, but that seems to be what has been going on. And also that there are minions, this is the best word I have for it, or those who are somatically embodied in the world that we are presently in, where this computer exists, but they have been inundated by those tiny micro machines, definitely from the neck up, definitely central nervous system. Because what I perceived in poetic, allegorical, visual language is that these guys had their heads stuck halfway in or were submerged into this realm of insanity. And we're talking about your government, world leaders, worldwide government, your military leaders, intelligence agencies, technocrats, people who are in the corporate space, and those who are supporting the consciousness reduction agenda on this world right now. So that also includes telecommunication infrastructure, satellites that are being used for supposed telecommunication infrastructure, medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, and food production, and also municipal water supplies. You're like, Aurora, sounds like 85% of our population. Yes. 85% of your population is clinically insane. They are part of this realm of insanity because they have allowed the assimilation via this internal implantation of artificial neurology for their central nervous system to be hooked up to or submerged within that sea of lies, or that force field of artificial justifications that once again justify the unconscionable. So if you're ever like, how could they do that? Like you find out about some pollution that's being placed into, food or something like that. And you always wonder about they, how could they do that? This is the answer. How could they do that? They are literally filled with a layer of insanity that directly emanates from and relates to primordial evil. So this is all backstory because you're like, none of this sounds good. Tell us something good. I will tell you something good. So what we did on one of our missions, somewhere along the time of August, was, oh, and here's Cheeky. Cheeky's my faithful companion. She's right back there, drinking her little water dish. And she's also a brave warrior herself. What we did as a group was first create a Faraday cage pocket world laboratory, where we could take some aspect of the consciousnesses that are in that labyrinth mirror world out of their world and experiment on them and see what frequencies and solvents can dissolve them or disrupt them or destroy them. Because you don't want to go in there. You want to figure out ways to do this without going insane. So we took some candidates, is a nice way of saying it, out of there. And how did we do this? Don't touch the blob. So under tons, this was a very, very dangerous mission. Do you understand? And something that we did in full support of one another, like a team of 10 people, all very brave and noble and courageous warriors, each with their own abilities and specialties to be able to do this type of work. So like one of my specialties is signals jamming and shielding because of my computational and calculation abilities. So I do a lot with that. We took several candidates out of that world, put them into this experimental realm, and we had it set up so that if anything goes wrong in the experiment, those guys would be ejected back into the mirror world, and we would be ejected out of, like, pull the ejector seat. We would get out of the bad situation and, come back into our world. The key point is we did not want to poop all over our world by taking those things here in order to figure out what works for them. And they were subjected to different types of frequencies, different things like love, responsibility, accountability, like these different ideals, and figured out an exact recipe that would be effective in terms of dissolving them. And then once we figured out the recipe, we did two things: created vats for dunking, and also created, for lack of a better word, like we're using conventional terms of warfare, but darts or bombs that could be shot around the perimeter of the labyrinthine world. And a lot of what I did with that was using my computational powers. I created various different versions of it. So it would be slightly different from all of these different vectors coming in. So it's a slightly different recipe from all these different places. And the recipe always equates to P.S. You don't exist. Like if it was decrypted and read through, the person who is receiving it, who is this, not literally, this is an insanity thing that cannot exist. It reads through this whole thing and then it finds out at the end of it, P.S. the person who's reading this message does not actually exist. But if you guys read it, you would be fine. You actually exist. So I hope that that comes across clearly, and I'm using shorthand to get through a lot of things and talk with you about it. So what we did then subsequently was we started at the perimeter, shooting these darts that are like this energy of dissolution around the perimeter, because you don't want to just jump directly in there. And then also we're able to systematically capture the inhabitants of that realm and send them through the dunking in the pocket world that we had created. And all of those guys were like outgrowths of the original primordial evil. And this was, again, very extensive and required a huge amount of concentration. We got rid of all of those guys that were around the original primordial evil, ate away at the prison and falseness of what was around it, and got everything shrunk back down to that original little thing, and then had that original little thing shrink down smaller and smaller and smaller. So I wouldn't say it's non-existent, but I would say it is neutralized, is a better way of saying it. And since that time, of course, there have still been disruptions in our world, but I really have felt that it has been from the minions that are running around really without a central conductor telling them what to do, but just continuing in their habitual or algorithmic patterns of disruption, but without actually having the unity and group cohesion since we did this thing. So if you want to know, like, is primordial evil bye-bye? Is it gone? What happened to it? Like, is it fully gone? I would say it is neutralized and no longer active, like in a non-existent state. But the challenge is it put a lot of these negative and corrosive narratives out into the world. Like, imagine a dandelion that sprinkles its seeds. The original plant isn't there, but all of those thought seeds went out into various different embodied people, and their insanity programs are still running in various different people. So since that mission, which can be considered a huge success, so that was one of the things I had beautiful recognition and celebration from sharing that at the retreat. Everyone was like, that sounds like a huge success. I'm like, it is a huge success, definitely. It did not signify the complete end of the war, however, because there's still mop-up. And so what we've been doing as groups and as individuals for the past, several weeks since that experience has been mop-up, meaning you're going to have to deal with all of the embodied people in this world who are full of the tiny micromachinery in their neurological structure that is still connecting them to the remnants and echoes and habitual states of that realm of insanity. And these are, again, world leaders, military leaders, food production, medicine, a lot of these larger control structures in your world. So still plenty of work to do in terms of cleaning that up. Let me just pause for a moment and drink a little, hydrate. And you can see why, or hopefully you can see why, like when we do something big like that, it does feel amazing and we are very proud and happy to do it, but it's not the end. That's why it's like, we can't just be like, hooray, like take off all your armor, hang everything up, you're done for forever. It's like, no, that is like done for the day. And then there will be the next thing to do the next day. So for myself as a warrior and a lot of the people that I work with, it's like, oh yes, ho-hum, like back to fighting. But it's not endless. It is finite. But I just want you to know that like celebration and recognition of these milestones is hugely important, but then also don't let up the pressure. Keep going in your own individual efforts and your group efforts because we're not there yet. So Alobar has been on, I would say not a vacation, but taking personal family time to recharge his batteries for the past couple of weeks. So we've been doing some independent missions while he is, doing good stuff for himself. And so I wrote up a couple of updates of what's been happening. This is from September 15th up until yesterday or the day before. All right. So I won't read my notes because they're highly ungrammatical, but I'll just use them. If you see me looking off screen, this is what I want to talk about. So this was on 9/15. The beginning of our mission started with an intention to look at United States Department of Homeland Security and the challenges of illegal immigration and people coming in to the country. Oh, this was very interesting. All right. Alobar did do, so actually this is overlap with something that Alobar did do when he was here. He already did a video describing this was about the trust, who owns the trust for our world. Actually, it's very good that I will be able to give another viewpoint on that experience and on that mission. Because what we found out is that there was a manufactured soul, like an antichrist, some type of a human-shaped container that had been created as an amalgamation of all of the very worst characteristics that you would call psychopathological, like the ultimate psychopath, manufactured into this world with an artificial or manufactured soul, again, like the worst Frankenstein of all the characteristics that could be out there, who was controlled by, for lack of a better word, 4 evil wizards, or 4 very evil consciousness presences that don't actually live in our world on Earth, but live somewhere, in an extra dimensional reality structure, but that they had some level of claiming of ownership of our world. And this is very big. We got into a huge tussle, not with one another, but struggling with words and with concepts, because a lot of what we struggle with is the abstract nature of reality about who owns a planet, who can own a planet, who can own a planet's inhabitants, and the concept of a trust. So this is, I will describe this to you. Satanic law is inverted and it is totally invalid. The idea of your Earth laws, which you guys call maritime law, a lot of you are very, very well educated and you already know that those are completely bogus, invalid, and have nothing to do with cosmic law. And if you step into that forum of going in front of, a person with a powdered wig and the little gavel, you are essentially agreeing to the rules of their road. It's like the rules of the high seas. Like you become very diminished in your presence because you're busy agreeing to their rules. It's the same thing with the lower astral, the lower digital astral, and satanic laws and satanic contract law, which is totally inverted and totally bogus and with no merit in terms of cosmic law. Cosmic law is like universal law, or what are like the laws of physics. And you don't have to argue the laws of physics, like a heavy object is going to drop, like the laws of thermodynamics happen. Like these laws are observed and embodied. These are not things that you argue and negotiate and quibble about, all right? So any place where there's quibbling, it's like definitely not at the level of cosmic law. And part of cosmic law is the sense of what you send out comes back to you instantaneously, as I've already described in some of our earlier mission work. So this whole idea of a trust is invalid because it was kind of trying to say that Earth was somehow not present enough to be in full ownership of Earth's self, and that something else should be controlling, directing, and being empowered over Earth, her consciousness, her inhabitants, and her resources. That, I say, is invalid from the very, very beginning. In Earth law, a person can be held in a trust. Like one famous example is Britney Spears, a well-known entertainer who seemed to have some mental difficulties, clones, and was determined by a court ruling to be not mentally present enough to determine what to do with her own money. And so she is held in a trust. She doesn't run her own life or own her own money. Other people around her that manage that trust determine how much money she has for groceries and how to pay her rent and all those things. That is the proposal for what has been going on with Earth regarding these 4 wizards. They are the supposed managers of Earth's trust. But we have to ask, like, what did Earth do that made it seem as if Earth was not capable of or, organized enough to be able to run herself? And this is what you as Earth inhabitants should all be asking yourself, like, why in the world should the self-proclaimed Galactic Federation of blah, blah, blah be here doing things on your planet? Why is your planet not good enough to run itself? Why are you as inhabitants of Earth not qualified enough to determine self-determination, your own leadership, your own social dynamics, your own economic dynamics, and most importantly, what to do with your own resources? So just like with Britney Spears, she has a lot of money from her, artistic expressions, in air quotes. Earth has a lot of resources, not just physical resources like gold or uranium, but consciousness resources in the creativity that we have here, not only sexual reproductive creativity, but music and art and all these other amazing things that are created here. We should be in full ownership of what we have as our divine right, and not have anything or anyone that is from another planet or another world claiming ownership to us. So within our group of psychic warriors, there was a huge discussion in the midst of this battle about how best to proceed, because we did not want to validate the system of satanic law by entering into it and then arguing about who should own the trust, which was one proposal, that someone who is Earth-based should say, I own the trust. That I said that was actually not appropriate, because you're validating this invalid system by doing it. And what you have to do is invalidate the entire system by doing it. But you have to invalidate the entire system by destroying it, is what I wanted to say. And also, there was a huge discussion about what to do about the reptilians that are total invaders and don't belong on this world or in this space, that our planet has been unwillingly sheltering for a long time. It's like having someone who's like squatting on your couch and you're like, I do not want this person here. I want this person ejected. So questions of who is in charge of that? And the reptilians were like, let our people go. Like, said, let us repatriate them and send them back home. And I'm like, no, you should destroy them. And you might be shock and horror, like, you should destroy them. I'm like, yes, you should destroy them. And I argued actually for what I call Texas laws. For those of you who are international, Texas is a state in the southern United States that is famous for its love of personal boundaries and personal sovereignty, including its love of firearms and the freedom to bear firearms. And the laws in Texas reflect this. So, for example, if you have a home intruder who comes across your front doorstep or into one of your windows, and if you shoot them with a shotgun, you will be found to be perfectly within your rights. You will not have any problem with the local sheriff. You will not be brought to court. You will be found to have everything perfectly in order, because that intruder came across your boundaries and you are then protecting and defending your property. It is established in that place. So I advocate for Texas laws in this planet. If a bunch of reptilians come across your threshold or come through your window, they are invaders, and you are allowed to use deadly force to protect your boundaries. This is very, very big, important stuff. So those of you who are perceptive, you can be like, oh, that's interesting, because the beginning of your mission started out with looking at the corruption behind a United States agency that involves what is known as illegal aliens, human beings, or demonically infested human beings, who come across nation-state borders without authorization. But this, as it often happens, turned into a larger mission and a larger allegory for those consciousness presences who have invited themselves to this planet, who don't belong here at all, and what we should do about them. And so it was actually a very challenging mission, because we didn't have the complete agreement within the group about what to do. And then we found ourselves under time pressure. And so it was summarily decided that Earth, Gaia, would take control of her own trust, and that then we would be unfettered in destroying the reptilians. I was just not even going to do anything about any of the trust legal stuff or whatever, because here's my warning. When you do something like that, just for expediency, if you're like, yeah, just sign the contract, then we can destroy everything. someone's going to come along later who can read time, and they're going to be like, oh, look at that. In this moment right here, you signed this contract and made this agreement, and they're going to try to hold you to it. So just use that as a cautionary tale. Never sign anything in life or in the astral realm just out of expediency. Never go along to get along. It will end up biting you in the ass later. So it was actually somewhat unresolved. And then, of course, we backed out and completed everything that we were doing. Hold on a moment. So usually we have a lot of good, solid cohesion in what we're accomplishing and our solutions as a group of psychic warriors, but we do not always. And that was one example when we did not have that total agreement on every level. But I mean, it's ongoing. So it's not like we have to do something and it's done. That's the only time we ever have to be able to look at it or approach it or deal with it. That was just, the end of that experience. That was on September 15th. Okay. So now we're getting into September 22nd. This is after Alobar had gone on his journeys. Okay. So we were looking into the PCR testing as it was done in 2020, and the reportage that those samples had actually been used for cloning purposes and to be able to disrupt this mission. So what we did was we wanted to follow the samples that were taken. It's totally against medical consent. It's totally against cosmic law. To make sure that people are safeguarded against non-consensual cloning. So what we did was we followed it, tracking it with our minds to a place where they were controlling human behavior with something that looks, I guess you would call it electroceuticals, electromedicine, telemedicine. There's a lot of words for this now. And I'm following some really great people on Twitter, including Sabrina Wallace is one voice talking about this, but there's a lot of other people that are doing the research to be able to find the different medical articles and journal articles that are talking about this exact thing. But it is not stated overtly for the public yet. But it is the concept that through the tiny micromolecular, I call it wetware, that is being self-assembled through people's bodies, that there actually are embodied humans that are very troubled, and I would say they are minions of the insanity realm, that have control apparatuses that they can use to control people's different physical characteristics, behaviors, and levels of health. So when I talk about sliders, different controls like on an iPad or something like that, and you are the subject. You're like, me, moi, yes, you. Yes, you. And it doesn't matter if you haven't been to the doctor in a long time. It doesn't matter if you didn't actually get something shoved up your nose. I think that they've got files on almost everyone and that they are direct neural monitoring pretty much the entire planet. And that's somebody's job out there. I think it's not just something that is being done by unseen forces or non-embodied forces in an astral or otherworldly realm. I think it's being done as a job by embodied people with actual somatic cells, all right? So this is important stuff. So we found the place where they were manipulating these different characteristics. This is again called electroceuticals, when they can beam something at you through frequency that maybe it can make you hungry or thirsty, or it can make you feel like you're on cocaine or on a tranquilizer, but it can also make you feel other things too. Like they can control all of these aspects, hacking your biochemistry, okay? All right. So what we did was found that if you could imagine like a place where there are many workers that are working on monitoring many different individuals, but there was a central magnetic object that was actually what was orchestrating and coordinating these various individuals. And that was the power to manipulate biochemistry, and that the magnetic quality was also in the technicians. Those are like clones or replicants. Yeah. So yes, telepathic, I'm answering your questions. What you have is a group of clones or replicants or artificial people who are themselves augmented, filled with the tiny neurocircuitry controlling stuff, and also magnetically influenced or controlled. And those are the guys that are pushing the buttons on those of us who actually have a real body and actually have a real soul. All right. And the room was run or orchestrated by a doctor, not a real doctor, more like a torturer, a hugely sadistic person who was really a human, not a clone or a replicant, but very evil. So this is not someone who's like fooled into doing what they're doing, where they're like, oh, like I think I'm just working on a simulation, and it turns out to be a real human. They know what they're doing. All right. Someone who is fully informed about what they are doing. And when we do this, so that means they're just very, very evil. We always do shielding and cloaking, and that's a large part of my job on these missions. So I did a lot of signals jamming and a lot of cloaking so we could have the invisibility we needed to be able to do this work. We destroyed and dismantled the magnetic emanator of the control energy, did different things like corroding the inner systems, blowing it up, demolecularizing it. Again, everybody's got different strengths in their mind abilities. So we use different things to be able to disrupt this apparatus. And of course, it wasn't the only apparatus. This was like one office, but it's connected to a whole network of other control centers. And I put special presence into their system that is like, if I'm what I'm really good at. I'm really good at pattern recognition and deciphering their communications, and they have, a whole neural system and a whole computer network. Special presence is, you can imagine what it is. It's something that when they read those messages, they will get information that is disruptive and corrosive and destructive to them. It will destroy them. It will disrupt their network. So this was connected to a larger network. Oh, and so, okay, we found the vault. The vault was like a Faraday cage-like place that contained all of these different DNA samples, because you guys got to know by now that DNA is not just about the molecular structure of your body. It's a frequency tool. It's an antenna that tunes into various different levels of frequency. So they were protecting these samples from frequency. So we destroyed the samples. Wait, let me stop walking for a minute so I can read. The vault of samples, the library from these PCR tests. And it's not the only copy because, of course, they sent some of it off world, but we destroyed what was accessible to us. And I went on to give a hard time to the embodied human bureaucrats who fund these programs, and I left them special presence too. The key point is that one of our group members, who's an empath, sensed the technicians were in a panic about some near future event, and it was not necessarily even our presence that night, which was disruptive enough. So they are pooping a brick of concern about something that's going on, but we don't know what it is or was yet. So and then we withdraw and left. So some of this is like skirmishing. Like that was a skirmish. We did a thing, didn't fix or heal everything, but it made their lives hard. And then we withdrew and get ready for the next thing. Hold on, I'm going to pause for a moment so I can get more water and hydrate. Hold on a moment. Now on to 929. So this was when we gathered together to respond to the newly ratified Pact for the Future, blah, 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 by the UN. Okay, so this is, you need to have backstory. This group that I work with have been wonderfully preempting a lot of the stuff from the World Health Organization. We did this work months ago. We knew that they were going to do something naughty, try to create or manufacture a new pandemic, some kind of monkeypox, blah, blah, blah nonsense. And we did a lot of things to de-energize that pathway and that timeline. And we were so effective that they couldn't even get it up for a vote. They were like, call a vote, and no one's going to want to go in, to the General Assembly and do their vote. So that thing lost steam. And then we're all like, la, 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 feeling so happy and relaxed because we're like, everything's great. And then they sneak this in on us. It's not a real vote. It was something that was just literally snuck in with no consideration and no magnification or no real conversation about it. Everyone just ratified it. But this is the blah, blah, blah Pact for the Future, which is a huge power grab. So the original treaty that we subverted and defused was all about what's going to happen under the next pandemic: total loss of human rights, total loss of medical freedom, total loss of sovereignty, and loss of nation state sovereignty in favor of some giant faceless globalist whatever empire that's going to tell everybody what to do, right? So this stuff is kind of like the unpleasant echoes, the smears that weren't fully cleaned up from the first thing. And what we did was we found that document, the Pact for the Future, in an etheric trove, or a better way of saying it is the energy. We found the consciousness energy of that document and the emotional energy that supports it in a non-physical place. And we also called in the energy of a lot of other invalid documents into that non-physical place, and then we just destroyed it. We went to town in the most wonderful way. So again, each one of us with our different psychic powers used different ways to either incinerate it, neutralize the information, demolecularize it, or wipe it out, so that the energy imprint of those contracts couldn't do anything. So even if the contract itself is still written in a PDF or written on a piece of paper or a scroll or whatever, it's empty. And I think that you can feel that you know the difference between something that really has a real bite to it or something that is just a paper tiger. It's paper tiger at this point, can't actually do anything to it. So that was a fast little mission that went great. Then we recollected, because you always have to like close the chapter, get out. It's dangerous stuff. I talk about it here like, oh yeah, we went out for ice cream, but no, it's dangerous stuff. We do lots of cloaking, lots of shielding, protect one another, create portals, get in, do our thing, and then get out. We did that one, got in, we got out, and then they're like, okay, we have more time. What else can we do together? So then we started a new mission, and what we wanted to do was go into human DNA and do a removal and a restoration, taking out the artificially spliced in imprint to worship government. It's a Stockholm Syndrome program. In case you guys don't know what that is, that's when people get kidnapped and then they fall in love with and learn to worship their kidnapper. All right. So this is the genetically implanted tendency to have an externalized authority figure like a king, a queen, a pope, or a priest, or even a high school principal or a professor or whatever, or a doctor, and then say, I give up all of my personal authority and all of my willpower to this person, and I listen to them. That is not a natural thing at all. That is a domesticated human tendency, and it was placed into the human genetic code by a bunch of very, very naughty genetic engineers a long time ago. So this mission was about going back into the human morphogenetic field, which is the field of pure potential that determines the structure of your molecular aspect of your DNA and your behavioral outgrowth from there, and to resolve and remove what had been artificially spliced in. Okay, so this was really great because we did heavy time shielding so that we wouldn't be recognized in what we are doing. And what I did was I mapped the erroneous slave DNA inserts so that we could figure out how to remove them from humanity. All right, so this attracted some attention from a galactic scale and extragalactic scale influencers that are looking at what we're doing. They're like, hey, wait, this is the conversation. So we're doing fast stuff, right? And all this conversation went by very, very fast, where these galactic scale consciousnesses are like, hey, like what you're doing, you should stop doing it. Because if you're doing that there, then what if you did that in other places? Kind of like set it as an ultimatum. And I was like, great idea. Let's do it in other places too. So then the mission expanded. It's like, get out of my face. We're not listening to you, galactic looky-loos. Expanded the mission to be not only cleaning up the DNA on this planet to return it to its non-slave state, but doing it everywhere. And then we went into super hyper overdrive because at that point, you are a little bit vulnerable in what you're doing. Super, 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 super fast overdrive. And we did that very bravely and very heroically. So we were under moderate bombardment, and I did lots of shielding and lots of resistance. And what we did was we reached 100% of what we could accomplish in that mission, which was 77% of the entirety of the galaxy. And you have to comprehend that this was very, very complex time energies moving through people, and some of our empaths got hit really, really hard from this to the point that they felt that they were dissolving a little bit, and we had to come back into our healing area, kind of withdraw and reconstitute them and make sure that they are back together into the right feeling state and that they weren't mushed. These are not the right words, but you comprehend. It was a perilous mission, and some of our empaths took a lot of hits, and we had to make sure that they got healed and that they came back. And then, we did a group cleanup and a self-healing after that. So this is important because that was on, again, 9/29. And then in United States, the Southeast mountainous areas, many people know worldwide that there was just a hurricane, a very artificially manufactured event that went through that area and caused an enormous amount of destruction. And also, in the aftermath of the storm, the United States government has been famously inept in not bringing in the relief aid, not bringing in ability like helicopters to bring in food and rescue people, and not bringing in emergency road crews to try to create some escape routes because the whole entire place had been washed away. And because we did this thing in taking out the genetic tendency to worship government as an authority figure, I feel that we had a huge positive impact on the response of the people in that area, where instead of people standing around being like, oh, I guess we'll just die of starvation and exposure to the elements until the government gets here. Instead, everybody said, F the government, and we're banding together and we're going to help each other as neighbors. And that was beautiful to see on a human level, but also beautiful to see in the sense of humans waking up to their own empowerment and recognizing, like, you have private aircraft, you have private helicopter pilots, you have people with motorcycles and off-road vehicles and mule trains and all these things, and people are donating, spending their own money, volunteering, going in and being super heroic and doing the job of either rescuing people or feeding people or giving immediate medical attention to people that needs to happen. And instead of helping people, the government has been seen as a huge adversary, a huge impediment. At best, a bunch of administrative, bureaucrats who come in wearing fancy clothes very inappropriately in a disaster area and say, yes, good job, good job, good job. But on other levels, the federal emergency agency that is meant to administrate these types of manufactured catastrophes being totally against the people, confiscating supplies, closing roads, preventing aid from actually getting through. It's a major turning point. And I can claim that we had a positive impact on bringing freedom, liberating people's natural ability to defend their community and help each other as humans, instead of worshiping and waiting for and admiring some external authority figure like the United States government or some type of emergency management agency. Okay, so now on to October 2nd, where we were working with, this is after Hurricane Helene, working on weather manipulation things that are going on in the Gulf of Mexico to try to prevent more havoc of more storms that are being manufactured. So we did a variety of different things. We looked at weather modification platforms, things that look like a giant white ping pong ball, and disabling those. We looked at dark magicians. Dark magicians are using their dark magic all the time to be able to harvest loosh, which is fear and grief and sadness and chaos, and put that into more loosh generating events like more storms. So we looked at destroying that. Some of this is related to ancient Atlantis, as the people that are on the east coast of the United States are living out reverberative, negative, catastrophic trauma echoes of what we all experienced in the catastrophe in Atlantis. And this is related to some of the crystalline pyramids and some corkscrew infrastructure that was in the actual seabed of the Atlantic Ocean. We also looked into its connection to Easter Island, as it was the time when there was an annular eclipse that was focused on Easter Island. We looked into any of the ancient indigenous or non-indigenous people that were there on Easter Island that were doing some different forms of weather modification in ancient times, or how that might have been related to otherworldly civilizations. And we also looked into a bunch of different things like pyramid structures and ancient monolith structures on the surface of Earth, the creatures or civilizations that erected them, their motivations, and how that has affected or afflicted Earth's natural weather patterns. The answer is it's complex, because I sensed your question. You were like, were they friends? Were they not friends? The guys who built the pyramids and all these other standing stones and laying down stones. And the answer is both. They weren't necessarily, not that they were friends or not friends, but that their infrastructure was at times used for human uplift and advancement, and at times used for human destruction and I would say the word fuckery and bad stuff. So a bunch of different things. Sometimes we go off on side quests or individual missions. Some people ended up going into Antarctica and went underneath Antarctica, they were fighting against not only like a perceived dragon system there, but also army personnel. And I think this is directly related to an infrastructure. There's a neutrino cube that is a research station in Antarctica that is supposedly about neutrino research, but that actually is about weather manipulation, specifically generating earthquakes and stuff like that. We reappropriated a lot of energy that had been misappropriated from the planetary infrastructure herself. So like life force energy, like the chi of our planet that had been artificially taken and put into a lot of these manufacturing of storms, we recycled that back into Gaia. So we reclaimed it, but we didn't just keep it for us, we gave it back to the planet. So you can sense the ongoing theme, planetary empowerment, giving Earth her freedom and her resources back. We pulled out. And then what I also can report is that from that activity, the dark side was totally in disarray. They were like grabbing their behinds and kissing their own ass goodbye. That I'm trying not to use bad language. But they were feeling very disempowered and unhappy after what we did. So that's always a good thing. Again, you can sense it's a skirmish. Doesn't win the whole entire war, but it definitely just destabilizes the bad guys and breaks their toys. Anything that's going to break their toys and take energy away from them is good for us, okay? And then I have one more, which is 10/6. It's just 2 days ago from the recording of this, where we did a lot of concerted effort to be able to diminish and redirect the hurricane that was brewing in the Gulf that is now known as Hurricane Milton. And from what I'm reading, like we didn't do a very good job, just in honesty. We did all sorts of different things that was to, diminish the heat signature, to send cool and dry air, to de-energize the hurricane's eye. There's an egregore or a monstrous representation of negative emotional energy that was at the center of the storm. We worked on healing or dissolving that monster. We worked on fighting against the dark weather manipulation magicians who were making and exacerbating this storm. We sent a lot of light to rescue workers. We also did a lot of work in going into the areas of Appalachia psychically to neutralize toxins that were in the mud, because there was a giant plastics plant that was part of what flooded. So we did what we could do to be able to try to help the people there. Did a lot of neutralizing of dark magicians and their efforts to subvert weather. It's just all I can say is we did a lot of work, but in watch, this is me, the morning of 10/8, the Hurricane Milton has increased in intensity and has become like an unheard of category 6. So it's benevolent to think maybe they're lying. Maybe it's not a category 6. Maybe it's all bluster. I would like to think that. But another possibility is that maybe we failed. Maybe we didn't do SHIT. Maybe we did our hardest and it didn't affect the movement or intensity of that storm. And I have to be honest, in the work that we do, we're always investigating, making new recipes, improvising. And I have to be honest in our assessment, like sometimes something works and sometimes it doesn't work. It's ineffective or it's an outright failure. So we're still waiting to see what exactly that hurricane does. But from my feelings, like my shoulders are down. I feel kind of like, okay, I don't think we did everything that needed to be done in that situation. So today what we're working on, because we do work even when we don't have formal meetings, there's a lot of prayers for calming the storm, protecting the people of Florida, and preventing just a giant trauma and grief response. We're making sure that those prayers aren't being subverted or hijacked or misappropriated, because that was the feeling this morning amongst our group. A lot of beautiful, positive energy being sent towards that situation, but a lot of it being diverted. It's like if you're trying to water your garden, but somehow all of the water goes on the weeds instead of the actual flowers you want to cultivate. So just trying to make sure that that positive energy actually does get to the people and have a positive impact. But I'll just tell you, I feel like we need to do a lot more. Our group needs to do a lot more, and never feel in your own efforts like if you're praying or sending resolution energies or healing energies to that area of the world, it always has an impact. Never be too afraid to do it because you're afraid that it's either going to be siphoned off or misappropriated or not have the impact that you want. Do it. Do your good stuff. Do your positive visualizations. Do your prayers. And thank you for our support of our team. We love it and we love it. I love being able to share with you what we're doing. None of it is like secret or anything like that. The truth is, I am mostly so busy in the activity of fighting for and protecting this planet that I don't always have time to be able to make a recap video like this about what we've been doing. But your support, knowing about what we're doing is huge. Your support, your energetic investment in what we're doing is also huge. So thank you for your love, your care, your support, and your prayers. And then for anyone who has their own particular practice, your own chanting or meditations or whatever it is that you do to connect to divinity, it is appreciated. Never be too concerned to do that because you're concerned about what type of an impact it's going to have. If your intention is good, it's worth doing. And then I consider myself and the other people that are in these groups that I'm in, we are like on the front lines, and I'm built for this, literally. That's why I'm here. So I have no qualms about being directly imperiled, but I don't want any of you guys to be directly imperiled unless you are specifically built for this, or unless you are specifically trained in this embodiment to be able to do these activities. So let's continue to support one another in all the things that we do. And to the people that are doing the physical embodiment, cleanup, and community healing in the places that were hard hit by these weather events, thank you. Thank you to the people that are actually driving in supplies. Thank you to the people that are actually physically donating their time and their resources. Thank you to the people who are looking out for neighbors. You are incredibly heroic and are the example of, being amazing in very dark times. So let's all continue to be heroic and be amazing in dark times. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.